on. There's an ad
You're
comes on.
on. Yeah, so
You're the only one on TV.
no, you're there. I can
You're
see
in
you
the
there.
middle of
You're
that.
there in the corner.
Okay.
All right, let's get started, folks. It is 1 o'clock here, and so let's open our time with a word of prayer. Let's pray. Holy and loving God, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for this group of people. Thank you for this time we have together. We pray that you will speak to us, that our hearts will be open to hear your word and to understand who Jesus is for us today. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Great to have. I said 1 o'clock a minute ago. It's 11 o'clock. Yeah. I'll learn to tell time eventually. Anyway, great to have everybody back again for our next session of the Gospel of Mark. We're looking at chapters 5 and 6 today, and so just to kind of a quick recap for anyone who wasn't here last week, or just to kind of get us caught up on what we're looking at. So we've been looking at these three big questions: who is Jesus? Question of identity. Who is in charge of the world? A question of authority, and a question of response. What should we do about it? How should we react to what we're hearing with Jesus? And so last week we looked at chapters 3 and 4, and we saw again, as we've seen all the way through the book, it's the demons and the villains and the evil spirits in the story always know who Jesus is. Every time they see Jesus, they're shouting out, "You are the Son of God, you are the Son of God." We saw here that the war that's been going on between Jesus and Rome, Jesus and the powers of evil, that is in full-fledged war. But now the conflict with the spiritual authorities, the temple, the religious leaders has gone into open warfare now. And that these groups are now working together, right? You've got the Pharisees going to the Herodians to team up to try and destroy Jesus. And so all of these people are working together to try and stop Jesus now. And we saw that that's also what the Pharisees are accusing Jesus of doing. They're saying he's Beelzebub, he's working with the devil, he's teamed up with them to try and, which makes no sense because they're the ones who are actually working with the devil. They're the ones who are actually working with all these forces of evil with Rome. And we saw that the disciples haven't quite figured out the answer to this question yet, right? Like, the demons are shouting out, "You are the Son of God, you are the Son of God," over and over and over again everywhere they go. And yet at the end, when Jesus calms the storm, right, he displays his power over nature, over the ocean, which is where all the trouble and the evil lives. Jesus is clearly in command of everything, and the disciples react by saying, "Who is this guy? What is going on here? We don't get it." Which is, they're missing something. They've missed out on what Jesus is trying to tell them. And we've seen that question of response over and over again. This idea of Jesus is still telling people to keep it a secret, right? Don't tell anyone who I am. And yet most of the time people go and tell. They don't listen to what Jesus says. But we also saw that reading last time about how Jesus told his disciples, everything that is secret will one day be revealed. Right now I'm teaching you in parables. Right now I'm teaching you in a way that makes it harder for people to understand and know who I am. But everything that is hidden will be revealed. Everything that is secret will come to light. The time is coming when there won't be any more secrets. And we saw that question about all the way back in the beginning, that question of the new wineskins. These old wineskins are rigid and hardened, and Jesus wants people to have new wineskins to take this new teaching into their hearts, as to have soft hearts, have flexible hearts. But we saw that last time the Pharisees Jesus was dismayed and grieved by their hard-heartedness. And so we're going to see those hard hearts come up again and again and again from the Pharisees and from some others in this story. And then last week we also saw this contrast between fear and faith. Again and again and again, Jesus tells people, do not be afraid, have faith. And the people who show faith are healed. They have God's life working in them. The people who have fear are closed off to what God is trying to do, and God's kingdom isn't able to reach them as it is for those folks with faith. So that's kind of where we're looking at with our responses here, with our authority, with our any questions on it, where we've been so far? Okay. So let's dive into our chapter 5 first. So we'll read through chapter 5. I'll give you about 10 minutes to do that, and then we'll look at it again. So looking as you read through, anytime somebody says this is who Jesus is, anytime somebody kind of identifies Jesus, write that down, note that. Anytime we see any references to authority, any references to the temple or the power of Rome, or any references to evil spirits and demons, and then any time where we're talking about any of these questions of response, that secret, those hard hearts, that fear, or anything in those lines. couple more minutes there just to kind of hopefully finish up the thought you're working on. All right, so let's gather back in here, and we'll talk a little bit about that chapter. And so there's kind of these three stories in this section. We've got this encounter with the Gerasene demoniac, the man with the evil spirits. In the Gerasenes, we've got this woman with a bleeding disorder. We've got Jairus and his daughter. And so, what in the course of these stories, what questions of identity come up? Who do people call Jesus in this chapter?
The demoniac calls him Jesus, Son of the Most High God, and you seem to recognize him even from a distance.
Yes. The demoniac calls him the Son of the Most High God. And immediately recognizes who Jesus is from a distance. There's no doubt in his mind. Comes running up and knows, this guy means trouble for me, right? Like he's terrified of what Jesus is going to do. And immediately, when he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and bowed down before him. So again, we've seen this again and again and again. It's the demons who are the ones who identify Jesus, who know who he is right away, and who know what he can do, right? It's not just you are the Son of God, but you are the Son of God, and that means I'm in trouble. You have the power to destroy me, and therefore I'm coming immediately and begging for my life. And that's, again, very big contrast with how the disciples, how the Pharisees, how everybody else is reacting to Jesus. Any other references that people make to Jesus through this story? Teacher, yeah. Some of the, Jairus' friends come and say, don't bother the teacher anymore, right? And that is a very respectful title, right? That's, rabbi, that's what Jesus is. He is a teacher. And so it's a very reasonable thing for them to say. But it's also it's not an accurate reflection of who Jesus is. The demons have a better understanding of who Jesus is and that's the same thing that the disciples called Jesus in the boat, right? Teacher, aren't you afraid that we're drowning? That's this respectful, ordinary kind of title for a respectable, ordinary kind of person. And yet it's very clear that that's not all that Jesus is. Okay.
Jairus, you got up there, he doesn't really call him something, but he comes to him, and this guy's in the synagogue, I just noticed.
Yes.
So, he has some kind of faith that he can fix.
Yes, for sure. Jairus is part of this group, right?
Yeah.
He's a leader in the synagogue. He's a respectable member of the religious community. And all of these people are lining up against Jesus, saying, this guy's trouble, we got to destroy him. We're even willing to work with the Romans to get rid of him. And yet Jairus knows his daughter is dying. That's right. And he is able to, act out of faith, right? And say, look, this is bigger than, this petty squabble that's going on where, all my friends are trying to get rid of this guy. I need his help, and therefore I'm going to go to him and seek his help. And so Jairus, acts out of faith, and says Jesus is somebody who can help me and who can change, who can save my daughter from this illness, who can rescue her, and therefore I'm going to put aside this animosity there, and go and follow. Any other mentions of authority? Any other mentions of either the temple authorities or of Rome, demons, anything like that in this chapter?
Well, Jesus' authority over the legion of demons.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
And also his
that's
power
right.
over nature,
yes.
like the pigs.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, you're right, Mary.
And yeah, so, and
And the sea as well.
yes, exactly. It's all in one big story, right?
Yeah.
What gets sent into the ocean, right? You get demons,
Yeah.
right? And what's the name of the demon?
Legion.
Legion. Yeah. And what's a legion?
6,
Many.
7.
Oh, jeez. Put it on the table.
Many.
Sorry?
Many.
Many.
yeah.
Yeah, but legion is a military term for the Roman army,
Mhm.
right? A
Oh.
legion is a group of Roman soldiers. And so for the demon to say, my name is Legion because we are many, he's not just saying we are many, he's saying we are many soldiers for Rome. We are the power, these two are in lockstep, working together, Rome and the powers of evil. And when you see the demons and when you see the Roman soldiers, they are serving the same master. They are working for the same foundation piece of evil. So you get the demons, but the demons are also representing the power of Rome. You get the pigs, right, which are unclean. No self-respecting Jewish person would be eating ham. And you get all of this driven into the ocean,
Yeah.
which is where all the evil comes from. In Jewish, the understanding is that the ocean is full of evil and demons and monsters, and they have now come up out of the water to cause all this trouble, and Jesus is pushing them back down and driving them back to where they belong, and showing his authority over all of this to say, these things are being dealt with once and for all. They're being driven back into the sea. They're not going to cause any more problems. And so you've got this power over power over the evil, power over the sea. Where does this all happen in? This requires a little bit of background knowledge, but do you guys know where the Gerasenes live?
Is it in sort of Iraq or Greece? Or?
Not quite that far, but this is all right. Let's try to. So you got the Mediterranean Sea over here. You've got the Sea of Galilee here. You got Jordan River, Dead Sea down here. So this is Galilee. This is Judea. Jerusalem's right about there. Jesus has been teaching and moving about in Galilee here, right? And in between you've got Samaria, which, just to be complete there, he's been moving around mostly in Galilee, teaching, preaching, Capernaum, Nazareth, all these towns up here. Last chapter we saw them crossing the Sea of Galilee in their little boat, and the storm comes up and they get in trouble. So now they are on the other side of the Sea of Galilee over here. This is the region of the Gerasenes. And this is Gentile country.
Yeah.
Okay? Jews live in Galilee, Jews live in Judea, but this territory over here is not Jewish territory. And so the people that Jesus is encountering here are the kind of people who keep pigs, right? Because you wouldn't have a herd of pigs just lying around in Galilee or Judea. Why would you do that? There's no money to be made in, having pigs, because nobody's going to buy that. And so we are in Gentile country here. And so Jesus is now expanding the mission out from just, he's been on these guys' home turf so far. Now he's going into, deeper into enemy territory here, deeper out into this encounter with, the power of Rome, the power of, all these unclean, evil things. Jesus is taking it to them on their home turf and facing down against them. Yeah.
Just reading both these chapters, and it really struck me. We are not so location doesn't matter so much to us in modern day.
Yeah.
But I gather it was very important in those times.
Yes. And so that there's a tradition in in the people of Israel all the way back through the Old Testament, you know, that and for all the people in the Near East back then, that, you know, where you were really mattered, not just with physical things, but with spiritual things.
Yeah.
And so there was this idea, you know, for a long time that, you know, gods had certain power in certain places. So if you were going out sailing, you would pray to Poseidon or Neptune, because they're the god of the sea. And if you're going up the mountain, you pray to the gods of the mountain. If you're on the plains, you pray to the god of the plains. Each city has its own gods that would be in power there. And so there's no point in praying to this god who's, you know, if you're in this god's city, you know, there's no allegiances there. You just pray where you want to pray. And, you know, all the way through the Old Testament, you get this clear understanding that the God of Israel is not like that. The God of Israel is in charge in Egypt. The God of Israel is in charge in the wilderness, in Israel. You know, the Philistines think, oh, you know, we lost a battle in the hills. Well, next time we'll fight them on the plain, because their God is the God of the hills. And they fight them on the plains and they still lose. And so there's this idea that, you know, all the way through the Old Testament, Yahweh does not have physical boundaries. Yahweh is not constrained by the landscape in the same way that all these little gods and spirits are. And what you're seeing here, is, you know, Jesus is, again, pushing out from these boundaries and crossing these barriers that, you know, are still very ingrained in the minds of those people. That, you know, you can be in charge here, but you can't be in charge there. You know, if you're over here, that works. If you're over there, it doesn't. And there's still a lot of that sense of, you know, where you are matters. And yeah, we're going to see that for sure in the next chapter. There's that idea of, you know, it's true even for Jesus that where he is makes a difference to what he does. But yeah, for this one, right, you know, he faces down against these Gentiles. There's this great battle there. He sends these demons that are all the powers of Rome and all the powers of unclean things into the sea and deals with it once and for all. Anything else on authority? Anything else that Jesus shows his authority over in this story?
He certainly healed.
Heals, yeah. And not just healing, right? What else? Jairus' daughter is dead. Right?
And
But they
brings her
laughed
back
at him.
to life.
Yeah. And so this is not just authority over illness. This is authority over death. And, you know, you'll notice that Jairus' friends and Jairus himself come to Jesus expecting healing. And once they find out that that Jairus' daughter is dead, it's all over. We missed it. He can't help anymore, right? So they recognize that he has power to heal. But when Jairus' daughter is dead, they assume there's nothing else to be done, right? And so there is, you know, there's the healing of the woman with the bleeding disorder, but then there's the raising of the dead. That's another step forward in what Jesus is capable of, in what the power that Jesus is displaying. You see that again and again and again.
She might have been in a very deep sleep, and they thought she was.
Well,
dead.
that you know, they're wondering, like, what is going on here? Because how could this be possible?
Exactly.
And Jesus says, you know,
He said, not dead but asleep.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that's what they laugh at, because I mean, they know what death looks like, right? They're not. I think sometimes we see, you know, ancient peoples and we assume, oh, they didn't know, you know,
That's
basic science, but they would probably be a lot better at recognizing a dead person than I would, because they'd have more experience with it, right? People would have died all the time. They'd be used to having children dying from diseases and, you know, and accidents and trouble. This is part of life. So in that sense, yeah, they knew, and when they laugh at him, they see how ridiculous this is, what he's saying. But again, Jesus is, you know, and he tells them, he tells Jairus' family, right? Oh, no, she's just sleeping. And then what does he tell them after he raises her from the dead?
Don't tell anybody.
Don't tell anybody, yeah.
Yeah.
Right? So this idea of, don't worry, she's just sleeping, nothing to see here, folks, carry on your day. He's trying to downplay, he's trying to keep a lid on what is happening. So yeah, with Jairus' daughter, there's this idea of the secret. Keep it. Don't tell anyone. Keep that lid on it. Don't let anybody find out.
In the Bible, though, like in the New Testament, Paul and others refer to death as falling asleep, right?
Yes, there is.
Is that, I mean, the language that they use?
There
sometimes?
is a kind of a euphemism in the same way that we sometimes, he's passed away.
Yeah.
There are kind of euphemisms about that. But when Jesus comes in there and says this, it's quite clear he's not using this as a euphemism, because he's like, oh, don't worry, she's fine. She's just sleeping. It's okay. Like, he's clearly and they're from their reaction. They know he's not just using this as a euphemism. They know that he's serious about it, and they think that that's ridiculous until he goes in and raises her. And so there is a sense of that. There is a bit of that euphemism use
They mean
elsewhere.
death when they're asleep.
But here it's quite clear that Jesus is trying to say that don't worry about this. She's going to be okay. In a way that's kind of preserving that secret, in a way that's kind of keeping that ambiguity there.
Okay.
They were astonished at, I emphasize in here, they were astonished that she was a 12-year-old.
Yeah,
In my Bible, yeah.
yeah. They're astonished at the healing. They're astonished that she's raised. How old is
12
Jairus'
years.
daughter? She's 12.
12.
That's another. This idea of 12 keeps coming up again and again in Mark. Jairus' daughter is 12. The 12 apostles.
That's
This reference to that Jesus as the building this new Israel, and so you see that number kind of come up again and again and again.
The woman with the disease, the hemorrhaging,
Yes.
she had had it for 12 years.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah,
too.
right? Like that's
Remember that.
that keeps coming up, that number. You'll pop
Yeah.
that again, because again, Jesus is the new, leading the new Israel, forming this new nation, this new identity as the Messiah. And so you see those numbers come up again and again and again of the 12, the 12, the 12. That these are now members in this new Israel. They're part of this new tribe of Israel. This woman, this little girl, that they've been welcomed into God's kingdom in a new way as part of this new formed Israel.
But Jesus tells the healed man, go and tell your people.
Yes!
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the
Exactly.
kicker.
Right.
The demoniac, go and tell everyone. So all the way through this gospel, Jesus is like, don't tell anybody, keep it quiet. And they're going and telling everyone. And yet this demoniac, Jesus goes and tells him, tell everyone, go home, tell your friends, tell your family, tell everybody what's happened to you. So why? Why? What's the difference between this guy and everybody else that Jesus has dealt with so far? Yeah.
He's going to map. He's a Gentile.
Exactly.
Gentile, yeah.
He's a Gentile. Everybody else so far has been Jewish in Galilee. And as soon as Jesus goes back to Galilee and runs into Jairus, he's again, don't tell.
That's right.
So when Jesus is dealing with his own people, with this group here that he's fighting off against, there is this secrecy and this carefulness and this not wanting people to know. And yet with this healing of this Gentile man, he says, go and tell everyone what I've done for you. And this guy is sometimes called the first apostle for the Gentiles, right? Years and years and years before Peter and Paul decide to go out telling the world about Jesus, this guy has already been doing that. Because he does. He listens to what Jesus says, and he goes and tells. He follows, and he goes and tells everybody in that entire community what he's experienced. And of course, these are people who would have known. This is the madman who's been living in the tombs and just this miserable lost soul is now suddenly healed in his right mind, telling everyone this is because of Jesus. And so you have this tension here, right?
That's right.
Secrets will be revealed when the time is right and when the place is right? When the context is right, now things will be revealed. Now the word will come out. And so it isn't yet for this side, but this side, yeah, there's some of that word is starting to come out.
I think too, the lady that had the hemorrhaging, I mean, okay, she had that medical problem, but she was unclean for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
12 years. She couldn't go to the temple or anything.
Yeah, and again, we've seen already through the gospel the ways that the kind of religious rules get in the way of people being healed, people being restored. And so we saw that with the rules about healing on the Sabbath, and now this woman she's unclean, she shouldn't come and touch Jesus because that would make Jesus unclean. It's a really risky thing for her to do. But she pushes through that because she's so desperate and because she knows Jesus can help her, right? And so we've got this question of fear versus faith, right? Jairus shows faith in Jesus by coming asking for healing. This woman shows faith coming to Jesus for healing. And Jesus says that, right? Your faith has healed you. Your faith has made you well. And it also says that she is afraid, right? But she's not afraid. Her fear doesn't come when she goes to touch Jesus. Her fear comes when she's dragged in front of the community and she thinks she's going to get. So she's not really afraid of Jesus. She's afraid of the community, the rules that she's broken, the trouble that she's going to get into. And Jesus tells her, your faith has healed you. And so, yeah, this is another example of faith where we see that. And again, we've seen that again and again. The people with faith, Jesus' healing it takes root and heals them, both spiritually and physically. There's one other reference with fear and faith. Did anybody catch that in there? After Jairus gets the news that his daughter has died, the friends come and say, don't bother the teacher, your daughter's dead, there's no hope any longer. And what does Jesus say?
Don't fear, only believe.
Don't fear, have faith, right?
That's right.
This is the question that even now, even with death looming there, do not fear, only believe. And so you've got this again and again and again, that back and forth between fear and faith. That if you and Jairus again does, he doesn't say, no, it's okay, Jesus, there's nothing you can do, I'm just going home. He goes with Jesus and he trusts that Jesus can still do something here, which is remarkable considering, what team he's on and what, that's a step of faith that, you wouldn't expect from him, considering all the other religious leaders have been reacting to Jesus with just hostility and hatred. Anything else on that chapter, in chapter 5?
I'm just curious about verse 30. The woman has already realized she's healed. And then in verse 30 it says that once Jesus realized the power had gone out from him, and he turned. I don't know.
Yeah.
What
There's
happened
this
there?
sense of that Jesus, he has this awareness of what he's doing, and yet it's also, healing this woman is not a conscious thing that Jesus does, right?
Yeah.
Jesus doesn't know that she's there and say, oh, I'm going to heal her, but she has to come to me, and it's this whole elaborate test. The power that Jesus has is just overflowing out of him.
Yes.
And he's aware when, that it's happening, but he's not omniscient about everything that goes on, which is I think we sometimes, we know that Jesus is God and human, and it's sometimes hard to figure out where, what he's capable of in what moment. And Mark has a bit more emphasis on Jesus's humanity and Jesus's limitations than some of the other gospels. In that here he really doesn't know what's happened, and he stops the whole crowd until he finds out, okay, what just happened here. But it's this understanding that God knows. God is in control of that power, and Jesus is trusting God. Jesus is knowing that he is God's agent in the world, and so he's not worried really that something bad has happened, but he wants to know. He wants to know how has this happened? Who has been healed through this? Because he knows something's happened.
Touch my clothes.
Yeah, yeah. And so, he's aware that power is gone. And again, this is, they're in a hurry here, right? They know that Jairus' daughter is, close to death. Everybody's trying to rush to get Jesus there in time. And Jesus is like, whoa, hang on a second, somebody touched me. It's understanding that the disciples would react with, like, what are you talking about? Come on, we got to keep moving here. And yet, they don't, you would think by now they would trust Jesus, that if he says, look, this is important, we've got to stop, they would back him up. And instead, they're the ones who are like, no, we got to move. It's important. We want to keep Jairus happy, right? He's a local official. He'd be a good ally to have on side. And Jesus is stopping because this woman is important. This is important for him to find out what's happened. All right, let's dive into the next chapter, chapter 6. And again, I'll give you a few minutes to read that through, and then we'll.
It's a long one.
It is, and just kind of skim through the Herod stuff if you need to. It's
He was a bad guy.
he's a bit of a villain there, so which is kind of the point of that story. Another minute there, and hopefully you had a chance to kind of get the vague structures of the stories there. We'll get more into more of the detail together. So we've got, kind of four chunks of story there. We've got Jesus goes back to Nazareth and has that encounter in Nazareth. We have this kind of aside of what's going on with King Herod. We've got the feeding of the 5,000, and we've got another adventure on the lake there. And so what are the references, the titles for Jesus that you see in this chapter?
Mine says the carpenter's son.
Yeah.
He was
So
Mary's son, yeah.
the people of Nazareth call him the carpenter. They call him the son of Mary.
Brother James.
He was seen as a local boy.
Yeah, he's the local boy. Yeah, and son of Mary in particular is a kind of a barbed comment, because generally you referred to people as, people didn't have last names, right? So you would say that this is Jesus, son of Joseph. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, right? That's kind of the way you refer to someone. If you are referring to someone as being the son of their mother, the implication in that is that they don't know who their father is. The implication is that they're a bastard, that they are, illegitimate, that they're disgraceful somehow. So this is not only just a, diminishment in comparison with Son of God. This is a diminishment in comparison with anything. This is a kind of a barbed comment there.
They took offense at him.
Yeah. They think he's no good. They think he's a local boy, and he's, that he's just somebody who thinks he's better than he is. But we know him. We really know who he is. He's nothing. He's just a scoundrel. His whole family's no good. This guy's nothing. And that's a pretty, again, with everything we've been seeing all the way through, Jesus has been, moving through the countryside, doing all these amazing things. And now he comes to his hometown, and they say, oh, no, we know better. Right? We know who this person is, and they're not letting anything that they have seen before change their understanding of who Jesus could be, right? They're not letting any of this, the stories they've heard, all of the miracles that have been happening, they are stuck on, what, they cannot let the new wine into their old wineskins. They're so set in who they think Jesus is, they can't see him for anything else.
I was amazed at their lack of faith.
Yeah, the lack of faith, right? They're completely lacking in faith, and we've seen with the woman, with the paralyzed man, with all these people, that it is your faith that healed you. It is your faith that set you free. It is your faith that has rescued you. And these people are completely lacking in faith, and because of that, nothing really happens in Nazareth, which is, again, a strange thing for us to think that, when it says Jesus was unable to do anything in this place.
Right.
And he says a prophet is without honor in his own hometown, right? Amongst the people who know him or who think they know him, they won't give him honor, they won't give him respect. And again, that is something we have seen all the way through this gospel, right? It is the people who, his enemies, the people who are far away from him, who recognize him for who he truly is. It's these people that are, openly fighting with him and realizing this guy can destroy us. We are in, we've got to run for cover.
Right.
Whereas it's these people who should know better that are, oh, this guy's nothing. We need to stop him. He's Beelzebub. He's just the son of Mary. And it's these people who Jesus is keeping secrets from, right? It's these people, his own, the people closest to him, don't get the whole story. They only hear through parables. They only, he tells them, don't tell. But it's these people, the people who are further away from him, the Gentiles, who Jesus tells, go and tell. Because a prophet isn't welcome in his own hometown. The closer you are to him, the harder it is to see him for who he truly is. And again, that secret will be revealed. That will change. It won't be that way always. But at the beginning of this ministry, the closer you are to Jesus, the harder it is to understand who he truly is.
Really is.
And again, it's strange that that comes out in a way that it says Jesus is unable to do it. But that is Mark has this understanding that our faith is part of that power that Jesus has, that we participate in the healing that Jesus works in the world. We participate in the work that Jesus is doing through our faith. And that is, especially for Reformed Christians who like to be Jesus, God is all sovereign, and it's not at all about us. We have no part to play. It's all God from the very beginning. This is a bit of a challenge to us because it is that sense of, no, we have a part to play. We have to respond. We have to have that faith there, and then Jesus works in our lives, and that's it's a little more complicated, I think, than we sometimes make it. I think it's good to put our emphasis first and foremost on what God does for us, but we can't forget what our response needs to be, and for Mark, that is faith. Yeah.
And maybe another trap is that we think we know who Jesus is.
Yeah.
We've studied, we've taken courses, we have a real clear, well, this is who he is.
Yes.
And
yes.
so
Mark is a real challenge. I mean, and the Gospels are in total, but especially Mark is really a challenge to the people who think they already know who Jesus is. The people who think they already are experts in what God is doing. And nowadays, that's us, right? Us and our self-satisfied Christians who we've spent the whole lives in the church, we know exactly what Jesus is doing. And it's very, very easy to let your heart get hard and think, I know already everything there is to know about what Jesus is doing. And not think that, there might be something new that could happen. There might be some new way that God is reaching out to us. And that, again, sometimes it's the people who are you would least expect, who see Jesus for who he is, and who, and again, the tax collectors and sinners who are coming to Jesus and seeing him. Well, nowadays, a lot of the time it's the religious folks who miss the point, and it's the people who you wouldn't expect who see Jesus and recognize that mercy and grace for what they need. So there's always that warning here, especially for us religious folks, don't let your hearts get hard. Don't let your conviction of I know exactly everything there is to know to block you from being able to hear what Jesus is saying, to have ears to hear and eyes to see. So we've got Nazareth. We've got that encounter in Nazareth. What happens? What did Herod think of Jesus? Herod and all his cronies.
He's scared.
Yeah, he is.
Some of them think that, Herod himself thinks he might be John the Baptist.
Yeah.
And others think he might be Elijah, and others think he was maybe just another prophet.
Yeah. Prophet. They think he's Elijah. And again, Elijah was this, the famous prophet who stood up against foreign domination, foreign invaders, the power of Baal and all this evil. And so, these are all very respectable things to think about who Jesus is. They're not true, but they're kind of just casting around for we can't explain this guy. We know he's trouble to us because Herod is a foreign invader, and they know that Elijah would not be, if it is Elijah, then that's trouble for Herod. But they're looking for some kind of answer to who this guy is, some kind of explanation to fit him into their worldview, but they're not really getting it. They're not really getting close. And that whole story about Herod is, partially to explain what happened to John the Baptist. We saw at the beginning of the book he gets put in prison. But it's also, Herod doesn't come off well in that story. Both in that, he's kind of arbitrary and, this kind of cruel sense of just killing John on a whim. But it isn't even his whim, right? In that story, Herod is not in control of even his own family, of his own court. There's all this stuff going on, and Herod doesn't want to kill him, but he made these promises, and his daughter, and all these other things going on. and you read that story, and Herod just seems really weak and really arbitrary and really kind of pathetic.
I think he's fearful.
Yeah, he's so fearful and so like all this stuff happening that he spins out of control really quickly. He makes these grand promises, and there's people scheming behind the scenes, and he doesn't want to do it, but I guess I kind of promised. I don't really have any choice. And he's scared that this guy's come back to life that he just killed. So you get this sense that, you know, if this is a big showdown of who's in charge, you know, and Herod is this big villain that has been kind of lurking in the background, and now you see him and he's just kind of a mess. He's not, you know, when you've seen Jesus's power and authority, and then you see Herod, and he doesn't even really, he's not even in charge of his own world, right?
Doesn't know which end is up.
Yeah.
I did read somewhere that he really wasn't a king at all. It's just something he called himself.
Yeah, I mean, he was basically the equivalent of a governor, but, you know, when the Romans installed somebody to run a place, they would say, all right, you know, if you want to be called a king, you can be a king, governor, you know. It didn't matter to them as long as the taxes kept coming in. And so Herod was a king in the sense that his father had been king, and there was a kind of dynastic arrangement there. But he was clearly, like, as soon as he upset the Romans, he was out of there.
Yeah.
He's not like, you know, he had no power on his own. He's just a crony of a larger evil that is, you know, higher up above him. And yeah, he seems really not that impressive when you actually read, you know, everything we know about him from the Gospels.
Bully.
Yeah, he's a bully.
Yeah.
Okay, one more thing about identity here, and this is a little bit of a trickier one to spot. What happens in that story of Jesus on the lake at the end of the chapter?
See, he's a ghost.
Yeah, the disciples look at him and say he's a ghost.
Yeah.
And what does Jesus say to them?
You not be afraid.
Take courage.
Keep
man.
going. Take courage.
Take courage.
It is I. Do not be afraid. That's what my translation is. Anybody else have something different there?
No.
No.
Right.
Everything is.
Yeah.
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 That's a bad translation. Literally, what Jesus says there is, "Take courage. I am."
I am.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know your Old Testament, I am is the name of God.
God, yeah.
And it is not a statement you would just toss around casually.
That's right.
And if Jesus is, you know, coming to them across the storm, again, all the sea, you know, walking over all of this trouble, all this evil, and he tells them, "Take courage, I am," that is bigger than just, you know,
Right.
That's right.
this is a statement of who he is. This is a
They're
statement that
amazed
he is.
because they didn't understand about the loaves.
Yeah. And what's their reaction there?
Their hearts were hardened.
Yeah. Their hearts were hardened.
They didn't understand.
They don't get it, right? And so Jesus is disclosing, revealing this big thing about who he is. I mean, if Jesus says, "I am," he is saying, "I am God." And they don't understand because their hearts were hardened. They have closed themselves off. Even the disciples, even the ones who are, you know, the closest people to him, who have seen everything they need to see, who have been hearing everything they need to hear, they don't understand, and their hearts are hardened.
Yeah. That's right.
And so you get this sense that, you know, even when, again, the people closest to Jesus are the ones who miss out. And even there, those hearts are hardened. Even there, they don't see what they need to see.
Well, what I've been reading is they did not understand about the loaves, which is the 12 baskets.
Yeah. So just before this, we've had, you know, kind of skipped over that part, but we had the feeding of the 5,000, right?
That's right.
And you've got there, you know, Jesus, this big crowd of people all waiting to see, and Jesus looks at them with compassion that they're like sheep without a shepherd.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
And, you know, a shepherd is, you've got the sense of King David, right? Any reference to being the shepherd of the people, that was the way they saw their kings, was that they were meant to be a shepherd for the people. And so Jesus looks at them and says, these are people, a sheep without a shepherd. And we've just had this story of their king, Herod, who is this pathetic, ineffective, miserable bully.
Yeah, exactly.
And Jesus looks at these people and sees they're like sheep without a shepherd. They don't have the king that they need to have. And then he feeds them. Feeding a group of people who are out in the wilderness with bread from heaven is, again, this kind of idea of, Jesus taking this role of Messiah and caring for the people in a way, the same way that Moses did, in the same way that David did, and the same way that Elijah did. You've got these stories over and over and over again of, this is the way God works, and this is now all happening in Jesus. And at the end, how many baskets of food are gathered up? 12 baskets of food.
Yeah, another 12.
Right?
Another 12.
So all of this has just happened, right? Like the disciples saw, this demoniac healed. They saw the woman healed. They saw Jairus' daughter raised from the dead. They saw, this crowd of 5,000 people, fed with bread from heaven, this multiplying loaves and fishes, and 12 baskets left over again and again and again. It's like hammer, 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 hammer. Get this through to you, folks. And then they go out on the water. They see Jesus walking towards them on the water, and he says, I am.
Yeah.
And how do the disciples react?
Amazed.
They are amazed and terrified, right?
Stunned.
Fear and hard hearts. And it's, it's sad that they don't get it. But again, we don't get it all the time. Right? And again, like, the part of the reason I love Mark so much is because these disciples are so much like us. They are so much that we, you see, if they miss it when Jesus is like, these are flashing lights and bright, look here, this is it. This is who Jesus is. And the disciples, they still miss it for now. And we're going to see that all the way through the gospel, like they're not at rock bottom yet. We're going to get there, but in the end, the question is still, are they going to respond? Are they going to see? Will they have eyes to see and ears to hear? Any last questions on that chapter? We kind of rushed through there.
Yeah. I'm just looking at verse 7 in chapter 6, where Jesus does give them, he calls the 12, and he does give them authority over evil spirits and sends them out with no money, no nothing. And if people didn't welcome, that was okay. But they went out, so they were able to go out and preach that people should repent, and they drove out many demons.
They're and it's good. We need to give the disciples their due when they earn it, because there's not going to be many more moments like that. But like they are given authority to do God's work, and they go and do it. Just like we are, right? And again, we have a part to play. Our faith has a part to play. The disciples go out in faith, and they do the work that needs to be done. They cast out demons. They carry that out. And Jesus says, look, if people respond with fear or with hard hearts, just keep moving. Shake the dust off your sandals and go to the next town. Don't feel like you've got to hammer away. Don't give up, but don't feel like this is all up to you. Just keep doing what you've been called to do. Go to the people you're sent to. If they hear, good. If they don't, keep going. But the disciples do, right? They do have this victory, but again, the victories only make the failures even worse somehow, right? That after they've been like out there casting out, doing all this amazing stuff because of Jesus, and then they come back and they react with fear and their hearts are hardened. Like, that's one of them, is this tragic thing that, like, You know, because up to this point, Jesus, we've seen that phrase with the Pharisees, that their hearts were hardened,
Yeah.
and now it's the disciples whose hearts have been hardened. And they don't understand, even though they've been getting a front row seat to what, and they have been doing it themselves, they still don't quite get it. Any other questions, any other thoughts on that chapter or anything we've talked about today?
The one thing I look at, and it's only, let me see, where is it? This goes way back to the chapter that was the Gerasene
Yeah.
demon. But it says in bruising himself. In other words, he was only, through it all, he wasn't harming anybody really, but himself. And I think sometimes we might do that too in our unbelief.
Yeah.
We might actually
Yeah, like this.
worry about it,
Or
and
just done
really we're
yourself.
doing it to ourselves,
Yeah.
whereas
Yeah.
Jesus is telling us.
Well, yeah,
Come to him.
this guy is, he is suffering because of this evil and all of this trouble, and he is, the demons, they don't care who they hurt, they just want more suffering, more pain, more misery in the world. And so they're going to, that's lands hardest on this poor man who is miserable and suffering. And I mean, it's the same thing with the woman who's been suffering for 12 years, right? She has been, all the rules of the temple have just made that suffering worse because she's doing it by herself. Both of them are, cast out of their society. They're out living on the margins, living in these, these dark places, and cut off from the people around them. And Jesus heals them and then sends them home, right? Sends them back to their community, reintroduces them into their, it's not just a healing inside, but then because of that inner healing, it becomes a social healing. It becomes all their relationships are restored. And so, when Jesus heals, it's personal, but it also transforms the relationships we have with the people around us. It changes the relationships we're able to have, because it starts with our own pain and our own trouble and the misery that we are in, and then that restores the relationships with the people we have around us.
That's right.
And so again, this is not, Jesus' authority is not just over one little thing. He's not just God of the hills or God of the plains or God of the sea. He's got that authority everywhere, except when, if our faith is not there, then in Nazareth, Jesus is, and not entirely powerless. I always love that thing that he was only able to heal a few people. So there was still some healing going on, but clearly it was underwhelming. And again, clearly, Mark, if Mark was just making all this up, it's a strange story to include, because it doesn't make Jesus look, the way we want him to look, as this conquering hero who never has any trouble and never goes. Like, Mark is just telling us straight what happened.
Exactly.
And yet, it leaves it up to us that we have a part to play in that healing, both for ourselves and for the world around us. That, as his disciples, we're called to, keep going forward in faith, going out with his authority to speak to the world around us. And that starts with healing what's in here, but then it leads to healing the world around us. That's the next step we have to take.
For sure.
All right. Any last thoughts on those chapters? Next week we're going to be doing, I guess we're up to chapters 7 and 8. And so again, you can kind of read those through ahead of time just to get a sense of what those stories are, and then we'll regroup for those ones next Wednesday. Let's close in prayer. Holy and loving God, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for each person gathered here. Father, we pray that you will keep our hearts soft, keep our minds open, keep our ears and our eyes ready to hear you and see you and follow you in all we do. Father, give us faith to bring your healing into this world, in our own lives and the lives of the people around us. Help us to trust in Jesus Christ in all that we do each and every day, so that we will tell his story and share his love everywhere we go. so that the world will know what Jesus Christ has done for us. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks, everybody. And I'll cut off the... Hi, everybody watching online. I'm just going to move you up a little bit so you can kind of see the notes, I hope. Maybe back up. There we go. Just to give you a sense of what we talked about today, and we will see you all next week.